into a school where they're going to have a future.
Good evening, and welcome to the work session. Today is January 27th, 2011, and I'll ask the superintendent to take a roll call.
Tom Martin?
Here.
Clay Haywood?
Here.
Kent LePage?
Once again.
Ann Walker?
Here.
Mitch Schulman?
Here.
Carol Chelman?
Here.
Rebecca Remerson?
Here.
Dexter Legg?
Here.
Leslie Stevens?
Here.
Linda Brulette?
Here.
Savannah Federo?
Very good.
So if you'll join me for a moment of silence, for you to spend some time with your own thoughts, and then the flag is up there behind us, and we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On the agenda, we do have a little section for public comment, even though it's not a full-fledged school board meeting. So if there is anybody in the audience who would like to come up and speak to the school board for 3 minutes, by all means. Okay, nobody, so we'll just move on to the main portion of the program tonight.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, at the request of board members last Tuesday night, I've invited John Stokel to come this evening and share with you kind of his thinking about the schedule changes that he's made that brings about the reduction of 2 ELA positions at the middle school. So, John, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. From all over the place.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk about the major changes which will take place at the middle school next year. And this is really all coming about with the reduction of a couple of English language arts teachers. Those reductions would be one at the 7th grade level and one at the 8th grade level. I think you may remember from the past where, when I've talked with the board about the way that was set up in 7th and 8th grade, that the students went to language arts 50% more than the other 3 academics. So that was really one, as part of that 6-day rotation, so you may have English language arts again on days 1, 2, and 3, and then that tied into the PE health program, which would run days 4, 5, and 6. So your language arts class was actually also your PE health class. So what I've done here is kind of sketched out what an 8th grader's schedule might look like next year. And I want you to concentrate on blocks 2 and 3. Those are the blocks which we call the Unified Arts blocks. In the past, that's where French or Spanish would reside. Now, once I take out those extra 3 days of that LA, that's going to leave me a void in the student's academic block. And something we've talked about, that I've talked about with the world language folks, is being able to move French and Spanish into that team block, out of the Unified Arts block. Now, with this change, we're able to do that. Because if you look at the other 5 periods, you'll notice what I've put in block 5 is French, Spanish, or intervention. So what we're going to do is we're going to develop an actual intervention program within that team block for 7th and 8th graders. Right now, when we need to move a student into a math intervention or a reading intervention, we really have to look at what are they going to drop in order to pick that up. And that becomes pretty difficult for a 7th or 8th grader. I have to leave tech ed to go to a math intervention or to a reading class or something. So what we're trying to do here is take this negative of a reduction of 2 positions and actually turn it into a positive as much as possible. Now, I met today with my entire 7th grade faculty, both teams, and kind of walked them through this possibility. And they're just really excited about what we'll be able to do with these different blocks of time next year. So let me kind of walk you through what can happen. Looking at block 2 and 3, again, the French and the Spanish move out of that unified arts and into the team block. That becomes the student's 5th class, which used to be 3 days of LA and 3 days of PE and health. So now we take the PE health and we move that into the unified arts block. You'll notice that under block 2 on days 1, 2, 3. And that meets all year long, because we run a 6-day rotation. So on days 1, 2, and 3, I'm going to PE and health. 2 days of PE, 1 day of health class. And that's with my PE health teacher. What we're able to do here for 8th graders, which we were not able to do, and this is going to get confusing, and for me, of course, I've lived it for years because I built this thing, and it all makes sense to me, but stop me at any time and ask questions. For our 8th graders, if you were in band or chorus or both, and you took French or Spanish, you were eliminated from all the other unified arts classes. And that's always been a concern for me, because typically, students leaving us in 8th grade, for many, it's the last time they will take an art class, or a music class, or a tech ed class, or a family or consumer science class in their K-12 public education. They have a 1-credit requirement, and they fulfill that in some fashion during their 4-year career at the high school. But they may never take another art class or a music class. With this change, here's what we'll be able to do. For our 8th graders, taking the French and Spanish out, which was full-time, and moving the PE health in, which is kind of like half-time, they can now, you'll notice, pick up 3 unified arts classes. A 3-day course in art, let's say for the first 12 weeks, and these are all trimesters, 12-week courses. A 3-day course in tech ed, and then a 3-day course in family and consumer science, and still pick up their band chorus in block 3. So actually, we've added to their program. Something they could not do before, they'll now be able to do. Now we go back to what I'm going to call the team block. For this particular student, they're going to start out block 1 with mathematics, block 2 English language arts, block 3 French, Spanish, or intervention, block 4 social studies, and block 5, that 7th period, their science. Along with this, I've asked the superintendent if we could extend the school day by a half hour, because we need more time. Our blocks were too short. What I heard for years from faculty was, before you know it, the class is over, and I haven't had a chance to bring closure to the class, and that's real important for adolescents, that there's closure at the end of that class. What we're going to be able to do is this. If we add 30 minutes, I'm also looking at taking some time out of that morning 20-minute advisory. If we cut that to 10 minutes, now I can add actually 40 minutes to instructional time. What we'll do is, because we do it on Mondays now, we have an extended advisor-advisee on Monday for advisor-advisee activities. Whether it be student aspirations or a team activity, that will continue. But on the other 4 days, we'll take some time out of there to put even more time into instructional time. So we will no longer have 45-minute classes. There'll be 51 or 52. And that extra 6 or 7 minutes is a lot. And that will be in all of the 7 periods. To tell you the truth, my first thought was, let's move to a 6-period day instead and make them even longer. But if I move to a 6-period day, then I start eliminating programs for kids, which I don't want to do, because they won't be able to pick up all of these courses they have traditionally had. So now looking at that period 5, as you know, the French and Spanish, there's going to be some attrition there as the students move 6th, 7th, and 8th, because it becomes more and more academic, and we're preparing kids for what the high school calls Advanced French 1 or Advanced Spanish 1. Making this shift, we will actually add 90 days to the World Language Program in 7th grade. Because right now in 7th grade, a student goes to French, let's say only days 1, 2, and 3 for the year. Now they'll go every day. And we will move back to preparing this cohort of students for French 2 or Spanish 2 instead of the advanced level 1. Because we're going to actually add 90 days more to that curriculum. And it's something that both of those teachers are real excited about. So now, okay, who's in intervention? When you look at this 8th grade schedule, I think I've reported to you in the past that typically about 60 to 65% of the 8th graders remain in French or Spanish. So 35 to 40% would now have a guaranteed intervention program in this block with their team of teachers. And we will concentrate on math, reading, and writing. We can also build in some enrichment programs in this block without adding any additional staff. So the students who are scoring the 1s and the low 2s on the kneecaps, those are typically going to be the students who don't stay in French or Spanish. They'll now be in an intervention block, and I don't have to say to them, you need to go to intervention, but to do that, you're no longer going to tech ed. That became a real problem with an adolescent, and I can appreciate that. Because they want to go to tech ed, they want to go to art, they want to go to family and consumer science. Now they'll be able to do all of that and not be, let's say, punished because I need some math intervention or some extra reading or some extra writing, and that can happen within that block. And again, when I met with the 2 7th grade teams, and I've met with 6th grade, 6th grade schedule is not going to change drastically other than all the classes will be longer. They'll be picking up more time in math, more time in language arts, more time in science, more time in social studies because of the extended school day. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything here.
Pretty technologically literate there, Mr. Stoll.
You know, and actually this intervention block built into the school day, that is something that we heard loud and clear from the do-fors when we started this work on professional learning communities. Because what he did at the high school where he was principal was he started these intervention blocks, but he knew if I make them after school, I'm not going to get kids there. Because again, it's a punishment. It has to be built in during the school day. And that's what this will give us. So at that point, I just open up any questions.
So, John, if there are kids who are not in French or Spanish and not in, they don't need an intervention?
They will be an intervention or enrichment.
Okay, okay,
Yes. No one will have, this will not turn into study hall.
okay.
No. This will be full classes. And discussing it with the 7th grade teams today, what came from them was, when we build this master schedule, can the 2 math teachers, one on each team, can they be doing their math intervention block at the same time? Probably look at the 2 science teachers, each doing a math intervention block at the same time. the 2 English teachers doing a reading, writing intervention block, and the 2 social studies teachers doing a reading, writing intervention block. Along with what we're able to do here is bring the reading specialist in to be able to teach a reading class, let's say for that half dozen or 8 students who may be 2 or 3 years below grade level, and they need a really intensive reading program with the reading specialist. That now can happen during intervention, and again, not come out of tech ed and art and those things which the kids love and don't want to leave for a reading class, because it turns the reading into a punishment. Now it can be built right into intervention. The special education teachers on the team, they can be involved in the intervention programs in teaching reading and writing and math. And again, we're going to target those kids who are scoring 1s and low 2s, the same way we did with our extended learning in the summer and after school, which will continue, but that's the idea of building it right into part of their day is what it becomes.
Dexter.
So this is really a brilliant approach.
I've been thinking about this for 2 or 3 years. How do we
But
get
you
there?
also have a passion about things that just makes me want to buy it. But what do you? But what do you? Well, it's not though, because what are we giving up?
Right.
We're giving up some time in language arts, okay? That extra 50%,
Right.
but not for the kids going to intervention, because they're going to still
may
have
get it.
that. They're still going to have that.
Or
So
math,
therefore,
or-
our students who do well, we're going to have to expect them to do more of this writing outside of class. A student who's in the advanced English level, I have no problem having that expectation that you're going to be doing more writing and reading outside of the classroom.
So the intent is for language arts to have the same intensity in a shorter time
Correct.
for your more proficient students.
Exactly.
So you're not gonna lower
Not eliminating or
the
lowering the
standard
standards.
or anything like
by
that
no
for them.
means. Actually, it's almost like upping the standards, because now we're going to expect more outside of the classroom, which you might have done in class.
Thanks.
I have Tom, then Clay, Rebecca, Kent.
So how much time is dedicated to intervention today? And you might have said that. I'm just trying to wrap my head
Right
around.
now, it's like a 45-minute block, but the problem is trying to get students into it, because you have to give something up.
Right.
You know, this right here will be able to have intervention for far more students because it's built right into their schedule. You're not giving something up. Like 8th grade right now, we're offering what we call a high school prep math class. It's a math class over and above their regular math class, but it's with their math teachers. We have some numbers in there, but not enough for me. There are more students that need that. But in order to go in, they've got to give things up that they don't want to give up.
Right. So is the intention to also be able to actually get people into the intervention program, but also out of it? You know, so the fact that we have
can move from intervention to enrichment. You typically would not move from intervention to French or Spanish, but you could also move to enrichment,
right,
where we're offering some other mini courses, electives type things.
Right. So I guess from a measurement standpoint, I'm just thinking that we actually have the model today, and people who are in intervention and move out of 8th grade and go into the high school and see what their proficiency level is. But now we have more time. We've got more kids who are going to be able to be actually dedicated into this program.
Exactly.
And so then we potentially will be able to measure that we actually have more kids who are testing higher. So that the idea is that we're actually going to get more kids graduating out of the middle school potentially at a higher aptitude level.
Yeah, and this actually ties into, I know that Ms. McDonough has mentioned this to you, we are moving also towards a model, and it ties right into what the core curriculum standards, where we want to get to the point where all 8th graders have an Algebra 1 program. Right now, Algebra 1 is really for the top 30% of the 8th grade. Same thing in pre-algebra in 7th grade. Now, where this came from was looking at the kneecap assessments, the 7th grade one, and saying, what we're doing in 6th grade, I'm not happy that it's preparing them for that assessment, because that assessment is full of pre-algebra. And in 8th grade, it's full of pre-algebra and algebra. So what we want to do is begin pre-algebra in 6th grade and almost make it a 2-year program. Pre-algebra in 6th and 7th, and Algebra 1 in 8th. Might we have 2 different Algebra 1s? One where it's the full-blown high school Algebra 1 course, and for some other students, what we might think of as that Algebra A course? Yes. Might we have more students who, and right now we have some students, who complete Algebra 1 in 7th grade, and in the 8th grade they actually get off at the high school and they take Algebra 1X and formal geometry at the high school and then come back to the middle school for the rest of the day.
Wow.
I can see more students moving to that because they're ready for it if they've completed the Algebra 1 in 7th grade, and I'm a little passionate about the math course. And I think that, you know, so that's why we're moving towards that model also. Because again, looking at that assessment, I'm thinking, we're not getting them ready for that.
Right.
We need to do more pre-algebra if we want more and more of our students to score proficient or distinguished on that assessment. And of course we do.
You've got me.
Clay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, this is great. I have to also agree with Dexter on this, that this is brilliant, and it's obvious that you have a lot of passion in this. And I also want to say is that I wish I was going back to school again. To me, this is exciting. And for example, if you had a 8th grader that was acing all of her or his classes, and then all of a sudden, during the 5th block, they may want to take a intervention class, even though that they don't need it, but then they also have the option of the enrichment class, you know, which is nice. But what you had just said is that there can be also an additional higher class, like say a higher Algebra 1 that is high school level. I think that would also grab some of the attention of some of these 8th graders that are kind of feeling kind of bored in school because they're doing all their work, they're doing all their homework, they're probably playing sports, they're probably playing a musical instrument, and they want to do something else. And I know exactly what they're thinking. And like what Dexter said, this is brilliant. And I wish you had talked to me about 4 or 5 years ago that you had this idea, because boy, I would have been pushing this for you.
Well, things kind of fall into
This is
place
great.
at the right time.
Right, because you could not have done this 4 or 5 years ago, but the timing is right now, and boy, this is something. It's super. Thank you.
Very good. Rebecca.
I like the idea of offering the algebra based on ability as opposed to grade level more. 'Cause frankly, I think the way we group students together by age is completely arbitrary and not their ability. But that's a whole other can of worms.
I completely agree with you.
And so when you're talking about the intensive writing course and you're going to be putting more responsibility onto these kids, how are you going to make sure that they're actually succeeding? And I think it's wonderful to have higher expectations, but there will be some kids who aren't able to make it. So I'm interested in what sort of backup plan you have.
That would be that intervention block.
Okay, so if they need it, they still
Can
will
move into that
expect-
intervention block.
Okay, and then my question to the superintendent is, can we just go ahead and make the day longer? What do we do, and can we make it even longer than proposed?
Well, we had some conversation with the leadership of the Association of Portsmouth Teachers. The contract calls for an 8-hour day. This, in terms of, the time he's talking about, is really 6.5 hours, John, if I have this right? From 7:45 to 2:30 or something like that. So it's well within the framework. It's not an issue.
I think it also mentions no more than 6 hours of contact time.
Instructional time, right.
When you take out the lunch and so on, we're really getting right to that limit,
Okay.
with that 6 hours of contact time.
So if we really wanted to expand it, it would be something that has to go through the contract
Down the road,
and the
right,
union?
exactly.
Right.
Because of that 6-hour contact time. Okay.
And one thing I have to think about is, how late can I run the day and still have adolescents be willing to stay after that for the extended learning, the mini courses, the intramurals, or are they all going to hit the bus on me and not stay involved in those after-school programs?
Well, and I know that after school for this age group has been a huge concern of yours for the kids who aren't involved in those kinds of programs. So I didn't know if shifting the day even later, would help sort of retain those kids and keep them occupied.
We might even lose some because of the time, because if you look at the 2:30, and now we're looking at the late buses, probably 3:30, 4 o'clock. You get much past that, and I'm probably going to lose some students who are thinking, I'm not going to get home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right. What is the current end time of the day?
2 o'clock.
Thank you.
Kent.
Hey, John. Last time I went through a scheduling change, it was a different Stokel.
Yeah,
Mr. Ed
it's the high
Stokel.
school block schedule.
And that's my first question. Is middle school not an appropriate place for a modified type block scheduling? Was that something that you've looked at, which kind of goes with your...
What concerns me with middle school and block scheduling is that you take a semester of math and you're off for a semester.
Yep. I'm still waiting for the
I think the middle
post-meetings
schools,
for
we'd
the high
lose that
school one we had
continuity. They need to be there
15 years
all
ago.
year. And if you get into a true 4 block, well, you can't take all your academics all the time, and that would concern me. That a 13-year-old has a whole semester of no math or no English.
Well, that was my question at the high school level, too, and I still haven't... We were going to come back 3 years later, and we never did, see how block scheduling... But that answers my first question. It is an age issue, you think, not necessarily an educational issue.
I think what we see is, and we know that many of our students, where they have half of June, July, and August off, through no fault of their own, are falling behind, and after 5 or 6 years in school, when they're coming into 6th grade, they may be a year and a half behind only because they didn't have those opportunities during the summer that a lot of their peers had.
Yeah.
There may not be a whole lot of books at home. They may not be visiting museums, and we know the research. We're not talking about students who are coded. We're talking about students who just don't have those opportunities. So if that happens in 2.5 months, what's going to happen if I give them 4 months off of math?
Yeah, and those were, I remember, I was a lone voter that didn't vote for block scheduling back, and your brother didn't. And again, he loved doing scheduling. So, yes, there was a couple of questions to go down on. Your start time would be 7:45, is that correct?
Look, we're looking at, and again, I think the bus contract is up, so we're looking at a 7:45 to 2:30. What we don't want to do is get to the point where we have to add bus runs because bus runs are teaching positions. So we've got to work with them also. And it may turn out that we can do a 7:45 to a 2:45.
Okay.
And if I can get 15 more minutes, great.
Okay.
But we've got to work with them on that, what's possible.
And I think that answers my next question, which is, because I'm not quite sure, if I do this and add a lunch in, I'm not quite sure the number of, the length of the time for each one of these classes. And it sounds like you're still kind of waiting to see.
If it's 7:45 to 2:30, then we're looking at 51, 52 minutes.
And that's with how long of a lunch period in there?
We typically run a half with 24 minutes.
Okay.
See, and the thing is, the middle school, where the groups are moving most of the time from one classroom across the hall to the other, we build in 2 minutes. They don't even need 2 minutes because they're just moving across the hall. Even though there's 2 minutes in there, they probably don't get the 2 minutes because they don't need it.
Okay. Next question I have is, this goes to a question I had the other night, and one that I, said I got hit upon last week talking to somebody, and I really have decided I don't care about, or I care to a degree, the student-teacher ratio. I don't want to ever see it too high, but I really want to know, especially when I get into, and I want to talk about this in a minute, the intervention type class, how many teachers, but how much time interfacing do they actually have? What is that student contact time?
For these intervention blocks, I want to look at no more than 10 students in that intervention class.
Say that again, 10?
10.
Now, that's not the regular math classes. Those class sizes are all still going to stay 20, 21.
Correct.
So this is a math class over and above your regular math class, but it's real intensive work. We might see where, let's say the 2 7th grade math teachers, even though they're on different teams, we don't want them to take on such an identity on a team that they no longer feel like they're part of the whole school.
Correct.
So we're doing a lot of grade level work also. So it could be that the 2 7th grade math teachers team teach a group of 15 or 16 in intervention. That may, and those are decisions I let them do as a team. I keep out of that and say, that's what works for you, go for it.
And that goes to my exact point about getting away from, again, number of students in the classroom is always an important subject, or important discussion point. But what's more important is that interface of what you're having with the student and the outcome, the measurement. And again, here's an example that actually rolls right into that.
You know, the thing with the math is, we've used a couple of different computer programs over the past few years. One Study Island, the other one Alex.
Yes, I will study it.
And now that we're getting our kneecap data back, we want to look at those students who used Alex, let's say in the 6th grade, how are they doing comparing to the students who maybe didn't have Alex? Because we may want to look at this math intervention and purchase Alex or Study Island subscriptions for the students in those intervention courses. Because, you know, I know last year Sherry Weston used Alex with her 2 6th grade core classes, and it was tough to get some kids off of the computer. She would tell them 9 o'clock at night is it, because she could actually follow through the program how long they were on at night. So, you know, and you give kids something like this, and, you know, it's not a textbook, look out, off they go. So we may look at tying a lot of technology into these intervention programs also.
2 more questions. A student that goes into your labeled intervention class would never have any foreign language in middle school. Is that a correct assumption? I mean, they probably wouldn't.
Might have been in 6th grade, but didn't continue on because it's really
Language arts would not be an intervention
academic
class.
course.
There would be no intervention class labeled for Spanish or French. Is that
No.
correct? Okay. And that goes to my last one, because I agree with you. If you do this after school, this intervention type thing, I think you're going to lose X%. Another thing I think is always, you know, how we brand something. And to me, you know, and I'm not an educator. I've dabbled with it on the board level, but never would I consider myself an educator. But intervention to me is a harsh word. And,
Oh, that won't be on a student schedule.
I mean, something like no. But again, I think we have to have a label for it.
And that's why in 8th grade, that's why in 8th grade, intervention math, we call high school prep math.
I just didn't
And it's
know.
okay to be in high school prep math.
Okay, I just didn't know if it would be better to call, because what I'm hearing here is not intervention. We're not intervening. It's course enhancement. It's enhancement all the time with students at a level. You actually, I don't know if it would ever happen down the road. You could actually have a very brilliant student that is in a course enhancement program because they are exceeding, you know, the science and the math. And hey, wait a minute. We shouldn't be holding this student back just because, and I think somebody said that a while ago, somebody over there, I think actually it was Rebecca saying, you're putting them in categories. And I worry that sometimes, wait a minute, we don't have the best, we don't have enough math or language or something for a student. So in a course enhancement class, could be something not for a student that's down on the lower level, but a student also on a higher level too. It might work in, not.
There's all kinds of possibilities, because there are times when we'll have a student who doesn't want to continue on in French or Spanish. It is an elective. Now, the student could be working on an independent study during the intervention.
That's what I'm saying. It might be a brilliant,
Exactly.
somebody in science. I think our science or mathematics, they could go on higher. Thank you.
Carol.
Ditto on all the compliments for the work
Thank
you've
you.
done on this. I think it's great. I think you mentioned that there were 2 positions that you've
One
been able
seventh
to
grade language
eliminate?
arts, one eighth.
One seventh.
One seventh grade
Uh-huh.
and one eighth grade.
Now, can you explain that to me, how that's going to work?
Well, what it was before, in seventh and eighth grade, in seventh grade, there were 2 math teachers,
Okay.
2 science, 2 social studies, but there were 3 language arts. So now, the class time is going to be exactly the same for language arts as it is math, science, and social studies.
Okay.
That third person in seventh grade and the third person in eighth grade, they were there because the students went to language arts 50% more time than their other academics. That won't happen.
Okay.
But for students in intervention, there'll be a lot of language arts, reading and writing. Those students, again, scoring the 1s and the low 2s. And for students who are doing well in language arts and are not in intervention, we'll expect more from them outside of the classroom. So we're not going to eliminate curriculum. We're going to do it in a different way, I guess.
Yeah. Gotcha. Thank you. That was helpful.
Yeah, just to follow up, I'd just say, I mean, just for the record, I mean, I think this is a classic case of low threshold innovation. You know, we're not spending any money. You know, we're improving the actual education that we're delivering to kids. You know, there's an opportunity to grow a program and give kids more time in the school that we need, and with the hopes that we're actually going to improve academic achievement. So, I mean, here's a case where, you know, we're talking about a lot of unfortunate things where we're cutting budgets in here, but here's a nugget that we've pulled out that says, hey, you know what, even though we're cutting budgets and trying to get to a 0% budget, you know, we have a way to improve our school. So that's a great, you know, PR piece.
Great story. Kudos to Mr. Stoll.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Ann, wait.
I'm sorry.
Ann,
sorry.
wait, John, don't
Let you
go.
go.
John, don't go. John, don't go.
You know,
Hold on one second.
I just appreciated all my colleagues asking my questions, especially Kent was bringing up many of the things that I would have been asking, because some people had been asking me, losing 2 language arts teachers. And basically, you know, your explanation was really well done in that it was just another way to allocate those resources in a much
And we are
better way.
losing 2 positions, but we've got to do what we need to do for kids.
And you're doing a better job for those
That's what we
kids.
have to do.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John.
You should give him an applause.
It's a great story.
Yeah, except he doesn't.
Okay.
Okay. The next,
Now that we all feel good.
I still feel good. The next item on the agenda is to talk a little bit about the reorganization in central office, particularly in special education. And so what I provided you, there's a packet of materials which gives you we were required to do this anyways for the budget booklet that the city requires, but kind of the organizational chart and what it would look like as you begin to think about what central office will look like and how we'll deliver services and the various entities. But page 2 is really where I want to focus and talk a little bit about how we're reconfiguring a position to be the Director of Pupil Instruction and Support. And really our thinking around that is we're combining what is known typically as Title I Director and the Special Education Services Director into this new position, a Director of Pupil Instruction and Support. And so our thinking on this, as I said, we went and visited cohorts. We looked at how other people had kind of developed this system. Rather than running 2 parallel systems, we really think we can create a coordinated system of student supports. You heard John talk a little bit about it when he was talking about Block 5 and bringing all resource to bear during that intervention block, specialist, special ed resource, et cetera. So our intention is really, in doing this, is to build a clear system of support for both identified and non-identified students, really based on our professional learning communities model. We think we're going to, I see this as, I know everybody senses loss around change in a position, but similarly, as in John's case, I think this is an opportunity to use resource more efficiently. And what I will share with you this evening is we've actually redrafted some job descriptions, but we recognize there's a need to go collaborate with staff, with building administrators this spring, and develop a clear understanding and plan of action for this system. So, the devil's always in the details and the implementation thereof. But that's essentially what we're hoping to achieve with this position. So what I've provided you is how we're thinking of this. There's currently 2 positions, Director of Special Services, Director of Title I. If you think to next year, if the board supports this, we would go to 1 full-time equivalent, which we would call reconfigure the Director of Pupil Instruction and Support. A key piece of this will be looking at coordinators positions at the K-5 level, the middle school, and the high school. And some of that resource already exists in budget, as I've shared with you. We currently have an elementary school coordinator, 1 full-time equivalent, who parenthetically gets 12 extra days per diem, as well as a department head stipend to facilitate that work. We have a middle school coordinator who has 10 extra days. We're suggesting that would carry forward as well. And then the high school has had, they've been titled department heads, but I think in fact they've been coordinator positions, 2 FTEs getting 10 extra days. We would have 1 coordinator and then 1 full-time equivalent resource position out of the 2 that exist. So that it's an adjustment of 1 FTE at the end of the day to deliver this. We were thinking a little bit about a timeline. We did have a conversation with the union today about our intent to restructure this and to talk about the, Ms. Burlett's laughing down there. We certainly did have a conversation, didn't we, Linda? Position, so we've given notice there. We would like to, after we've worked with folks and get an input from staff and administrators, et cetera, bring back a job description for your approval. Our intent would be to post these positions, make them available to folks who might be interested in them, and then, assuming a successful budget, whatever that might be, appointments of the position in June. So, also in your packet, you'll find the description of the new position and how we're looking at doing the coordinators' positions. There are job descriptions at each of the building levels. And so I would want to suggest a couple of things. One is the model at Oyster River, I would remind you, was exactly that, building level coordination with a person at central office. When we went and, in fact, we had a good conversation with Councilor Kennedy the other day, who up in Guilford, I guess some 3 years ago, actually did it. They did it in the other direction. They absorbed Title I into her position. So it's not unprecedented. We're not geniuses. It's not brilliant, per se. But,
We'll be the judges.
John, we'll leave that to John Stokel. So, I lost my train of thought. So I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
That's all right.
One of the questions I have is that, we're using, and sometimes it's just like I never say, I'm not going to compare my kids because they're very different. They have different aspects and different outcomes in life. And thinking that what you just said, I worry about it because one of the biggest differences between Oyster River and Portsmouth is, and I know I have it here somewhere, and you might be all, they were almost at 0 for free and reduced lunches.
6%.
6%. Well, that's almost 0.
Yep.
And we were at 23, 24.
Mm-hmm.
And in that cohort of kids, I guess, of free and reduced lunches, do we know the number of students with special needs? And again, it seems more at the, and I may be totally wrong, it seems more at the elementary level.
What percentage of their student population is identified? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, or ours is identified
Just
that's
under
in the free and reduced lunches.
Oh. I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Because that's, to me, as I think Carol's pointed out, we have almost the same number, but it's the more dramatic type things that we've been seeing lately. And again, it's just an odd,
Yeah. I don't know the answer, but I'm happy to find it for you.
and it may not be even relevant to anything. It may be that if 50%, I would worry about it. If 50% of the students on free and reduced lunch were of special need, and I say, wait a minute, something doesn't, something to think about, but I don't know.
So the change, the bottom line change, I mean, the same level of resource that exists in buildings continues to exist. It's a more enhanced coordinator's position at each of the levels. And you have in central office basically taken, or tried to coordinate support systems into one position.
Right.
Hoping to garner coordination instead of parallel ways. That's really the thinking behind this.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess that was kind of my understanding that that the actual impact to the student, is really not going to change, but also that we have students that typically who require one service potentially might require the other service, and so now we're actually bringing those together. Right? I mean, is that a fair assumption?
Sure. Yes.
I mean, so it seems much more natural to me, so that it's not like you've got a whole group of people that only need this one service, so they're better served by just that one service versus bringing all those things together.
That's right.
Okay, fair enough.
Did you have one follow-up?
Sure.
And maybe I had to step out for a second. Did I miss something on the high school resource teacher? That's actually a newer position.
Well, I think what's going to happen, and this will be another sense of loss, is that you currently have two positions at the high school that have that. You're going to, only one position will be the coordinator's position. So there'll be a net loss to someone of those 10 extra per diem days that's currently enjoyed. And as we were suggesting the other evening, the need for a guidance coordination, we're looking to capture those funds in order to get a guidance person to help us move forward with the guidance plan and ASCA model. So some of those funds will be offset. Steve will share the financials a little bit, the numbers, a little later on this evening, but that was the thinking there.
Well, if I could just, because that was also my question, Kent. So what is the difference then between you call it a department head?
Yeah, I think there's been some confusion.
And the resource teacher?
Well, you won't have two department heads. You'll have a high school coordinator, and then one of those positions will be a resource teacher. Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
Any other questions at the moment? No? Okay.
Okay, well.
Next up?
Sure. The other piece was listed in the presentation the original evening as a strategy under consideration. And I know even last May, when the board did its workshop and talked, I mean, the notion of the PEEP program arises regularly. And I know we had a workshop out there last June and looked at that, and there is no question, I think there's some paperwork in front of you, that it's a highly integrated and successful model. And so what we did is we just took some time, and I'll share this with you, what would be the challenges, what are the opportunities if in fact we move the PEEP program to Dondero. I mean, I think the conversation has typically been where would, that it would go to the high school, that there was space available in the high school, and it would share some of the playground space with the little Clipper program, et cetera. And so, I've talked with Beth, talked with Paula and others. The challenges are, I think we have the model program currently at PEEP. It's fully integrated with Head Start, community campus childcare, Families First. Another big challenge in moving that would be, in order to sustain what's an inclusive model with typical peers, is the need to attract children to come join the program, i.e. typical peers who might come and tuition in and be part of that process. There's a challenge of transitions for those children who do attend community campus childcare all day. They need to be transported at midday, so they're kind of shuttled from one spot to another where they currently stay at the same location. And the big thing is moving the program. What are the physical space requirements? Beth has been clear there's a need for 2 classrooms that have appropriately sized bathrooms and changing tables, a need for storage, office meeting space for staff, the coordinator, the speech, the OT, et cetera. There's a need for indoor play space when outdoors is not a possibility for them. And then there's furniture needs, gross motor equipment needs, and she's provided an estimate on that that's in the back of your packet, as well as the impact on Dondero of moving classroom space. So all this to say, we've looked at this. And what are the opportunities? You'll see the opportunities list isn't as deep, but clearly, one of the things that recurs over time is the lease, and the current lease that runs till October 31st next year is $51,786. If you did move the program to Dondero, you eliminate the need for the half full-time equivalent nurse that you currently have. There may or may not be an opportunity, it depends, because some of the integrated pieces provide you other adults, i.e. Head Start, community childcare, that give you other adults attending to our children. So it's not clean. You kind of got to pull pieces apart, and it's not as neat and tidy as you might think. So it may or may not require, but there may be an opportunity for use of paraprofessionals, not just in the P program, but in the school, speech, OT, PT, et cetera. And then, of course, you have the coordinator dealing with 3 locations, not 4. So that was a conversation we had. You can see that the sum total of that in terms of savings annually is probably less than $100,000, but you know, it's a recurring cost or savings over time. So we throw that out for your consideration. It's not anything we recommended, but we thought the board should have an opportunity to discuss it, say we looked at it. I did provide you I think the layout of Dondero, and thinking about where would be the best location. It would be moving to those 2K classrooms in the top right-hand side of the map. That's the space. The bathrooms are already there. Building a playground out behind, out to the above, I guess I'd say, the page that you see. So there is space, assuming the population remains constant at what it is today, about 309 students.
Rebecca, Kent Dexter.
So where would kindergarten go?
Well, that's what I said. One of the challenges is now everybody's moving. It's kind of, you're bumping down the, everybody's moving. There's a lot of space in the area next to the library.
Okay.
That's classroom space that's used for other purposes,
Okay. And then this is certainly something that cannot be considered during this budget cycle.
What do you mean?
I mean, we can't get this up and running at Dondero by August of this year. I mean, building a new playground, moving everybody, I mean, that just seems like that needs a lot of lead time.
Well,
Or, I mean, if it is something the board decided, do you think that would be feasible to do?
I think one of the challenges would be, in talking with Beth, I'm not worried about getting the playground up. I mean, there's some there's some groundwork, et cetera,
Whatever needs to be
and those
done.
pieces have been looked at, and you'd order those, and you can see the cost. That's an add to the budget, unless you find monies elsewhere to do that, of some $33,000. What I would worry about is if families have already committed to attending the community campus, trying to bring typical peers in and trying to generate interest in that kind of a program would be a challenge. I'd be more worried about that.
Yeah, it just seems like this is something that you need to have a significant lead time on. And if we put it in this year's budget, it would actually increase our budget. Because of the
Unless you found
startup
another
cost.
revenue source to
Right.
assist you with that.
Okay.
Well, no, it wouldn't increase your budget, because as you said, you'd eliminate a half-time nurse, you'd have other savings within the rent. So
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so, and I question why we're saying on that classroom furniture needs is that we purchased those pieces that are currently there. Oh, yeah, I'll go back. I know that we absolutely did the sand and water table, because I remember asking these questions, well, what is this, and so forth. So much of this furniture was purchased, I'm not going to say all of it, was purchased under school budget funding over the past, especially when we first moved in, and now, again, when we moved in, it's been, I don't want to tell you how many years, I can't remember.
And the irony is actually this furniture needs list was a memo that you might have saw in 2007. Beth shared it again. So I don't know ownership of the furniture. I just know it was reported that we'd have to go out and get this. So I could
Most
Yeah.
of that stuff's there.
Yeah, most of the stuff's there, and we, it's,
Okay.
we rent empty rooms, so, again,
I'll look into that.
believe us, the landlord isn't that nice, they give us the furniture for free out there.
Dexter.
So, just an observation, I can't help compare and contrast this recommendation after listening to John gaining 2 FTEs and actually improving dramatically the middle school program. And actually, the Director of Support Services and combining those really is an opportunity, we think, to improve the administration of those programs. And this is pure cost.
Oh, no question.
Pure cost.
No question.
And it's not clear, it's a lot of cost.
It's a half-hearted,
So, over time, it might be worth $80,000 a year, but there may be some unintended consequences of this. Since we have a model program, we're catching those kids early on. The presumption is that they're better off as they enter the school system. So this one, I think we need to think really carefully before we pull the trigger on this, because you're taking a model program and you're making it much less effective, and you don't quite understand some of the unintended consequences.
Question.
So, I mean, I applaud the administration for.
Well, I think
we
you
need to
need to
find
do your
money
due diligence.
somewhere.
I think you need to explore all options, that's all. And I'm happy the board's having a conversation about it.
I was just looking at the configuration of the rooms and such, because there are other possibilities other than, say, the 2 kindergarten rooms. But, I mean, at one point, there were 4 classes of every grade. So, the rooms that emptied out, basically, people have kind of spilled over into, they made a classroom into a reading room and such, which is what you do with empty space, of course. But
Right, exactly.
there are other uses for it. It's a possibility. And I think a lot of the materials that are listed are things that are already there.
Tom.
Just to Dexter's point, I mean, this is a cost exercise, and I take a look at the first year savings is, after you look at the takes and the puts, it's a very modest savings, if any. But also to say, if this is a model program, are there ways that we can improve it? So we have students that go in there. You mentioned about attracting other kids to that program. So if this is a model program,
So they're
I don't know what
already there, right?
I'm trying to draw on my memory of capacity, and they said there was some room, but I don't remember. Can you refresh me on if they said maybe there was room for maybe 4 or 5 other kids in that program, or what the actual number was?
The P program or the typical peers?
The peers program.
Geez, I don't know.
You're talking about where it is now.
Currently.
Currently, because they said, the capacity, so we have PEEP, and then we've got the peers program, but the peers people are actually paying, or, it's a revenue.
Childcare.
Right.
I thought those
No,
kids
no,
at
no,
PEEP
it's
were merged with the
community
community
childcare.
campus.
Yeah.
They merged, the
they
community
don't
campus,
pay.
I think, has 3 or 4 classes of typical peers.
Right.
Right.
And I think PEEP is that population that you look for that is in
Oh,
need
so
of
it's,
special ed.
sorry, it is the other way around. So it's
Right,
the
so
PEEP
they-
that you can actually bring in. Okay.
PEEP, they merged the PEEP kids into community
Right.
campus, so that they're sharing, we're not paying for community campus grown-ups and
Right.
adults, but, it's sort of a mutually beneficial.
Right. But so the offset is the PEEP, is to
Right.
say, are there kids that we can attract that would actually be in the PEEP program versus the peer
And
program?
it's the inclusive model done at that grade level.
Yeah, right.
It just works out nicely that way.
I think that might be more like the furniture cost.
Well,
Carol.
I just have one comment. I think a lot of what attracts parents is the quality of the teachers. So if you have really high-quality teachers and you have a good, safe building, I don't know that location has to be so incredibly important. As long as you have those really good teachers, I mean, I think most parents, that's what they're going to look for, is good teachers, and what the teacher-to-student ratio is. How much attention do the kids get? And I think in this area, it would be important that there be other kids, not just kids like this, that there be a diversity. But like you were saying, I mean, I think, I'm not sure what I think about this really, but I think that it's tempting to get locked into the model that we have, thinking this is all-inclusive, this is great, it's such a success, and locked into it, and continuing to pay that rent year after year after year after year, rather than stepping outside the box and saying, well, what is good about it? How can we recreate that at Don Darrow? How can we make Don Darrow this really attractive place and location? And I think it's going to take some work in making it really appealing. But I think it could be done. I don't think it's has to be in this location in order to be successful.
Linda.
Oh, sorry. I was waiting for somebody to say something. So I might have this all wrong, and correct me, Mr. McDonough, feel free.
At my own peril, Linda.
So I thought, and I know there's audience members who might be able to help me out here. I thought, by law, kids have to be caught. Correct. You are referred to PEEP because you're in need of special ed services prior to coming to elementary school. Right. Am I right?
Yes.
Right. So, the problem I thought that Beth, the problem that sort of worked at where the location is now is the kids that go to community campus are those little same-aged kiddos who you won't find at Don Darrow because Don Darrow kids are 5 years old coming to kindergarten. There are none of those little 4, 3, 2, 1, however year olds. And aren't there laws around those kids coming into, like, I know that there are exit laws, you have to be at certain places in a building, and you have to be in a flat space, and you can't be here, and you have to be there. So there are other sort of, what did Dexter say, unintentional or
Unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences that you don't know about, and it looks like it might be a clear split. But I believe that Beth has said on several occasions that there's a lot of other reasons that it's not going to be just that sweet to move them over.
Yeah. I wish she were here. She had wanted to be here, and she was, she's a board member in Dover, and they're engaged in negotiations tonight, so she was unable. So I'm sorry she's not to answer the questions you have, but I think you're right to a large extent, Linda.
Yeah, I think that that's what I remember her saying, and I think that the other part I remember her presentation last year was some of the families that partake in PEEP also partake in those other services that are out there.
Yes.
And I know that you can't be leaving something and paying rent just because of that, but it certainly is, it's kind of the way, it's the nice thing to do if you can do it, because they need support, and that support is in that building. So they might be able to get other services along with their children's needs taken care of too. So I think you need to think of the bigger, for the good of the, take one for the team, for the good of the whole.
I don't know, I think I differ in some of that, Linda, is that PEEP was not...
free.
Yes, I know. PEEP did not originate there, and PEEP blossomed at the furthest point away from education in Portsmouth. It was out in a dirt hole, because Jones School really started to go
I remember that.
downhill. I mean, PEEP and PASS were actually in one building, and PEEP has had a couple of homes. And, where it blossomed really well, and it had some, I remember the discussion when we were moving over to community campus. We didn't want to because of the success that it had out and had its kind of exclusivity out on the base. And, they had their own building on it. So,
at a time when there were a lot of kids, and I think that they met the needs at Pease there were a lot of kids there, and they could probably
no, this is Pease had closed.
Right, but there were still kids there because I was there. Remember when Brackett, and then we went to Jones?
Right.
So I vaguely remember the whole thing in about 93.
Not long ago, yeah.
But anyways, I think that it belongs where it belongs. It was good there for the moment, but I think that when you talk about model programs, Beth stressed last year that it is a model. I mean, people come there and look at what she's done or what the staff has done out there. You have a bunch of dedicated staff, plus you have kids who receive maybe from Child Community Campus, they receive maybe the support and services from our experts and support their needs. So you sort of, it's a mutual beneficial society. The PEAP kids get supported by all the great teachers that are out there, plus those teachers are able to see the other little kids that could be coming into the system and say, and maybe support them at the same time. So I just don't want to see a rush to judgment. You know, I know that we're trying to save money. I get that clearly, but I think it might be not in the best interest to make a hasty decision.
And I would just counter is that, and again, looking at it with all eyes open is that then one would say PASS is in the wrong place. Because if you really want kids, and that would be a different philosophical view of how kids would be integrated and so forth. And I've heard that argument from others, and I don't totally agree with that. But again, I think it's how you utilize the best, as you're saying, the best for the service of the kids.
That's an apple and orange kind of deal.
Depends on who you're talking to.
I think if this was budget neutral and we were simply looking at what's best for the program and moving it, would that improve the program? Would it make it better? I think that's, at the end of the day, that's what's important to me, and I don't think that moving it is important, and it has come down to budget. And there are all these unintended consequences, and how much are we going to pay for transporting these kids back and forth? And it's not on the coast bus schedule, so you have all these families with no transportation. How are they going to get there? I don't believe Coast goes in on Van Buren. And I just think that if we put the money and budget aspect of it aside, look at it, how can we improve this program? Is moving it to Dondero going to be an improvement? I don't think so, but that's, I think, what we need to look at. I think what Mr. Stokel did is great, and I would like to see all of our principals figure out how we can improve the program, and if it happens to save money, that's great, because we're in this awful budget season, and I think we need to focus on that, and any unintended consequential savings are a bonus.
Tom.
Yeah, I mean, maybe making the picture clearer, has us taking a look at the demographics. You know, how many people ride the coast bus? How many of those families that are in PEEP actually take advantage of Families First, so that we actually have a very clear picture of.
Beth was telling me today that 10 students actually participate in the Head Start program as well, and 20 are in community child care. So that's kind of the breakdown of the 30 students, the way that works out.
So so then
fully integrate,
Yeah. So then the other piece is selfishly looking at our own situation. We can sit there and say we can actually build a program that's going to work, but in the grander scheme of things, our component is part of a much larger wheel and a functioning wheel, so that selfishly we could take it out, but it'll damage the actual motor from running smoothly the way it's been orchestrated. So I think there's valid points on both sides to say selfishly we could probably run a very sufficient program by itself, but it will lose the benefits of being part of a larger organization.
Right.
And so maybe that's really part of what we have to consider is not just the component by itself, singularly, which we can, and we are, but to actually look at the other
synergy that exists.
The synergy that exists, yeah.
So I think it's a good thing we've talked about this. I think if we were to try to do it and try to find a cohort of typical kids to come into the PEEP program, then we'd be running a PEEP program and a child care program at the same time. And I just, speaking for myself, I'm not sure that my goal is to save money at all costs. And this has a tremendous cost that you couldn't put a dollar figure on, but it has a programmatic cost. So, okay.
So the last piece, and then we can maybe garner some next steps from the board. Steve Bartlett has compiled what the current numbers are, what the adjustments that we've proposed look like, and he can walk you through that.
The majority of the discussion to date and the presentations that have come out have been on a narrative basis as opposed to, a numerical comparative basis. And it was requested at the last meeting that we try to show, some of the discussions we've had, we say, we have savings here, but it's netted out against a smaller increase in expense and stuff. So what I did was take our internal worksheets and try to put them into a spreadsheet that would be relatively easy to explain and hopefully you'd find useful. But quite often, I think it's relatively easy to explain because I deal with them every day, and then I get some blank looks. So let me give it a shot, and we'll go from there, okay? You may recall from the PowerPoint presentation that the superintendent presented, he had certain groupings of savings against that baseline budget number that we gave you the first night. So if you go from top to bottom, you can see, and front to back in this case, we have the three groupings: the system-wide changes, the student support changes, and the last one, what we're titling strategic improvement changes. The left-hand column tries to give you an idea of the location of the change. The second column in is our description of what the change should be. And then because we were given the opportunity that if we eliminated FTEs from the system, that we would be able to take a credit on health insurance. So that's the reason why I have 3 FTE columns, because this is a working document internally as well. So of the FTE columns, the first one is the effect on the general fund. And if it's a positive number, it means it's a savings. If it's a negative number, as you can see, you can go down to about the fourth line down, you'll see that's the first type of an offset. And that offset will carry across to the cost columns, which come after the 3 FTE columns. And then I give you the net savings, which is what Ken had asked for. So, for example, if you go down to central office sped director, you can see that the net savings we've identified is $102,790. Now that's the combination of $107,884 offset by $5,054. Now what I've done is taken the salary numbers and grossed them up to include FICA and retirement in all cases, so that you have the true costs.
So they're fully loaded?
Pardon?
Fully loaded?
Yes. Yeah, so that's all in.
Okay.
And then in the very far right-hand corner, I've just totaled up the sum of the net savings for each of the sections which the superintendent had been identifying. And at the bottom, I put the health insurance savings based on the allowable FTE changes as I'm interpreting the instruction. And then we have the Ed Jobs grant, which is $195,000, which we can move salaries and benefits to the tune of $195,000 out of the general fund. So that's another offset.
Is that a one-time grant?
Oh, yeah. Well, I say one time, Arrow was a one-time, and then they stretched to 2 years. And technically, the Ed Jobs is another presidential era type thing. So could there be something next year? But we don't know of anything. So what we've tried to do is identify what we know at this stage of the game. And so if you take this amount and deduct it from the original budget number that we'd given you, our targets based on his PowerPoint presentation, we're still at approximately $400,000 that has not been identified on this sheet.
That's helpful. Thanks.
One thing I did want to share with you, and that is that what appears under system-wide central office, the last line, teacher professional development, I had neglected the other evening to share with the board that the teachers union has agreed to do that, so there's $50,000 there. And I'm glad Steve, kind of did the numbers very tightly, because I thought we would have gained a little bit more against our delta there, but yeah, we're still a good ways away.
Well, Linda, I'd like to thank the teachers union. Just so everybody, I'd like to thank the teachers union. for doing that, for stepping up. Ken?
Ed, going down on this, a couple
Yes.
of questions, and again, just getting this, I think this is our homework sheet almost to a degree, because this is where we either agree or we start to disagree. Under maintenance, when I read that, the shift for that job and however that job is put out for filling the new position as you gave us back at one of our first meetings.
Right.
I noticed also, and I'll just use the word rental coordinator was kind of now going to be a duty of that job. There's a stipends that has had in the past. Is that coordinated into it? We have paid for, the rental person, I can tell you, it used to be owned by Leona. I mean, there have been, it used to be owned by the band director at one time.
Okay.
So, I mean, there always was a stipends that went with it. Now, maybe that's gone away, because I think currently, does Karen do it over?
No, here's
Where is the money?
this has been a loose hand-me-down system that you've referenced.
Oh, it's awful.
For a long time. So it's been handed down and passed down a couple. Currently, the only place that there is a stipend is at the high school, and it currently is a stipend that's associated with the custodial supervisor position, because they've done the scheduling and the coordination on site.
So that would go away from that individuals?
That remains to be seen based on how your rental policy comes out. That's part of the discussion as we get into the rental policy and the pricing and everything, how you do that, because that's not paid out of the general fund money, that's the net out of the rental receipts.
That's how we take them.
That's how you've done it, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, at one time, I think there was I'm going to say
Wow.
X amount of dollars, but again,
It's
it's
entirely
had different
possible.
legs many times.
Yeah, right, I mean, way before my time, so.
Okay.
So that's an open item, but what we were talking about was functionality when we mentioned that the other night, because what we're trying to deal with is coordination and standardization across the district for, all our custodial cleaning and products and services and methodology and levels of service and levels of performance in how we view our buildings, and the same thing in the coordination with the rentals. So I don't have a definitive answer as to whether that would stay or go away. It's not included in what's on your paper right now.
Okay. The next question I have, Ed, is down under music. And we all know that, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Wendell is retiring.
Right.
And that you're going to, it looks like,
So
31,000 is not Wendell's.
So that's the
Come on.
differential.
It's the
So
difference.
we got a retirement and a replacement, and that's the savings from a high end,
Okay.
budgeted at a master's step 3.
We're not trying to do anything internally to share some of the past duties, hats that Wendell has worn, I guess. Is that correct?
We're replacing the position,
We're replacing, yeah,
as we are with PE.
okay.
So that's the same thing with PE, difference between retirement and transfer.
Okay, and that, okay.
So it's this,
And if I could just give you a little clarification, in past years, by the time we gave you the baseline budget, we'd already done those nets, so they weren't identified for you as easily.
Right. Well, and
This year, we didn't do it because there were fewer, and we decided it would be easier to identify those net changes here.
PE's a little more black and white because, retirement of that individual might not have had as many hats. Wendell kind of wore a drama hat, somewhat of a coordinator's hat, and I don't, where are those duties going? Are they going to be reassigned, some of them?
Most of those duties have been associated with stipends, and those stipends would be available to.
We're not doing away with them, that's all I want.
No, you can't. They're in the teacher's contract, so they're there.
But they may not go to the new individual that is hired.
That's it.
right.
That'll be
Okay,
an.
that's-
Wendell could come back and do it.
Wendell could do those
Conceivably.
partially.
I mean, I don't mean to speak for Wendell.
Okay.
I guess he could. Yeah.
Tom and then Dexter.
Oh, wait, still going down.
Oh, you
the-
still have more?
Yeah.
Sorry.
On the Portsmouth High School PMS re-engineering, is this the retirement offer that you?
English, those are the 2 English transfers that, because of John's schedule change.
Okay. Then, I guess that gets me, and 2 more questions.
Yeah.
Seems to be a loss of student services under PHS/CTE. We will be losing, no matter what, some type of programming out there. It looks like.
Yep, as I said, there were 12 students in both Auto 1 and 2, and so we've adjusted that to a half-time position. And then what we've done is, you might remember Diane Canada has talked about making welding part of a 2-year program. She's made application to the state. And so she's called the state, and we've looked into this. It looks like we'll be able to use the Perkins money to cover that position, the welding position. So that's why you see an adjustment of some $114,000 there.
Okay, but I mean, I want to make it clear to the public, we're going to
lose half of an automotive teacher.
Right.
Absolutely.
Which, is snowballing. It's a snowballing loss of program. And lastly, I want to make sure I'm not missing it here. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not seeing any portion of the retirements, the offer towards early retirements. You don't have that calculated into this sheet in any manner.
That's correct. We don't have any.
Well, that's what I'm saying at this point. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Was Tom ahead of me, or?
Well, I thought you pointed to Dexter.
Yeah, no, I was scratching my head.
So a process question. We have, after this evening, we have 3 more scheduled meetings before we have to agree on the budget. And to get to the 0 target, we have about $370,000 more dollars. You've presented one possible proposal tonight with Pete. Are there others that the administration has that they're going to present to the board for consideration? And if not, at what point do we begin to work as a group to either get to the $1.9 million reduction or not, but by looking at some specific reductions?
Yeah, so we had this conversation in the office today because I think you asked the question the first night, what's the backup plan? And, we were loath to do that, and it's all about timing and with the retirements to see what, if anything, can be generated. I did want to kind of maybe have another conversation with the city manager. So I would think Tuesday night would be appropriate time to maybe be ready to lay that out with the board.
Okay.
I didn't think it was appropriate.
No, that's fair. I mean, so not that I doubted you. I knew you had a plan.
Yeah.
I just wanted to hear it again.
Oh, fine. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
It's one plan.
It's Plan A.
I'm sure it's a brilliant plan.
Yeah, right.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
So, any other questions on this?
I just had one quick question for you, Ed.
Yes.
So let's say, just for example, the music teacher position.
Yes.
Are you just making an assumption that we would hire somebody who would be at that salary level?
So sometimes you hire a little bit higher, sometimes
Yeah.
a little bit less, and it averages out. So it's a conservative plug number.
Okay, so you're plugging in the lowest that we could get
No.
for that
No.
position?
No.
Okay.
Master step 3.
Okay, so it's not the lowest?
No,
Okay.
it's kind of a,
All right, so it's where
in the
you
middle.
think it'll probably be?
well, it
in
could
the
be,
middle.
sometimes your net savings, you never know.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so I guess the question is, moving forward for the next few weeks.
Right, so on Tuesday night, what we will do is, we have a workshop. We want to share with you the last piece of this, which is kind of the strategic improvements in the budget. You'll see there's some ads on the backside, and we'll explain that and walk you through that and how we want to move the district forward directionally. We'll also be able to share with you, kneecaps will be released publicly on Monday, and so we want to, tie that in and share some good data with you there. And we'll lay out in some fashion to the board kind of Plan B or the how else to get there, knowing we still wait till February 7th for any possible retirements to come in the door. But we'll put them out on the table for the board. Okay? Yeah, great.
Questions? Very good. Meeting adjourned. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right.
So moved.
All in favor?
Second.
Open the last one.
Nobody said yes. You all want to stay?
Yes.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes, you want to stay?
No.
No, you don't want to.